This week on the Kellie and Scotty podcast, Kellie and Scotty take a trip to Duncan, where a man was in the women's change room. Let's get to the discussion, shall we? For our viewers, we just had like 15 minutes of great talk, and I realized that I hadn't pressed the button. And we were talking about language. Hi, everyone.
Welcome back to the Kellie and Scotty podcast.
So the current topic is the Cowichan Aquatic Center. An event happened there a few weeks back where a man was in the women's change room. And that man defended his actions by saying he could identify as a bearded woman. And the video, it goes kind of dark, but what the family is reporting is that a physical altercation took place. And this has sparked sort of outrage in the community for people who are defending sex-based rights and the trans activists who think that's absolute bigotry.
Yes, the trans queer plus crowd put out several notifications that this hateful, harmful, hurtful protest would be occurring and to stay away because there could be violence. And they did it as if they haven't been the crowd that initiated the violence at the Million Marches on Nanaimo, and they weren't the crowd that initiated the violence at other events that have gone on over the past, what is it, year and a half, 2 years on the island, where it's been the trans queer plus crowd that have attacked the protesters standing up for sex-based
And
rights.
directly Serena, directly her, like at that Victoria March, the two busloads swarmed Meghan and Serena. For those of you out there, we're talking about Serena Winterburn. She ran for school trustee, I believe, in Victoria. Her activist name too is Serena Freedom Bear. She was actually would you say she was emceeing it? Sort of speaking on behalf of the family at the event.
Yeah.
And she did a really great job. But Chek News, our local news company, did a very false reporting and called the event an anti-trans rally and published this. And I think it's still available on Twitter. They've apologized to Serena. Serena has this on her social media page on Facebook, and retracted it. And Serena shares those emails, but nothing publicly has been retracted. And I think she's owed that for the way they swarmed her in Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
She straddles a very difficult place. Her and I have had disagreements over language, but she shows up. She did this marvelous event. She had open mic. I actually didn't realize it was an open mic, but I thought these speakers were planned, but apparently they weren't. It was an open mic, and we had who did we have there?
There was, I believe, John Pirie was the candidate for Cowichan Valley. I believe his speaking was planned, but there was the father with his daughter who wanted to speak,
And they were from the Mohawk Nation.
Yeah, there were several. I'm not good at remembering names, so I can't recall the names of all the people who spoke. But
The father and the daughter were so adorable, and the little girl was so sweet. Like how anyone could take hate away from that. Yeah. And there was a lot of struggle with language. And people just really wanted to stress how they didn't hate trans people, but there's certainly a place where sex-based rights is in high conflict with how the trans laws are being interpreted. One of the other speakers there I noticed was, I believe, April. I forget how to pronounce her last name, and I don't have my other device in front of me here to double reference. She's from Cosbar. She was there and
Hmm.
she did a speech. And you and I met her at the Meghan Murphy event in Saltaire.
Yes.
And then there was a woman, an older woman who had witnessed the naked man in the change room.
Yes. And
And
had actually filed a complaint.
that's right.
Yeah.
And then Serena talked about, on behalf of the parents, about the other fallout from this was people who were bringing their elementary school kids into these universal change rooms or people with special needs. And there's been several complaints lodged about men ogling and looking at
Yeah.
these naked kids.
Yeah.
And I want to say who else did we have there? We had John Curry and we had Rad Femmes Canada. They spoke,
Yes.
and I feel like an elder, and I'd love to be able to pronounce their name, and I can't. But if you go to Serena's site, you'll be able to see the whole thing live streamed. There's a couple of other people who I believe filmed it. Is it the Western Independent? You know,
I'm not sure who was there. I know Rebel News was there for sure.
Rebel News was there, and then there was some like actual reporting. Oh, well, we'll try and get that and put that in the comments for our viewers about
Yeah,
where
that'd be
some
excellent.
fair reporting that isn't Czech news.
Yeah,
And if anyone ever felt like writing on to Czech news and asking for a formal apology, I think
that'd be great.
Serena deserves that. She's putting her neck out and like just in a really vulnerable place in
Yes.
on the island.
Yeah.
So you got an interview with Drea.
Yes. Yeah.
That was great.
John Curry arranged that. It was about a 2-minute interview because they were rushing off to catch the ferry off the island, so she didn't have much time. But yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was good.
I love the clip that they used. They're like, I'm a detransitioner. My existence is hate speech.
Well, it's I've had a lot of people on Twitter telling me that my speaking out, telling my story is hateful, harmful, hurtful because I'm stealing I'm somehow by telling my story I am taking away from the healthcare of individuals who identify as being trans. And that's part of what's really this whole change for me with speech has come about from being labeled constantly hateful, harmful, hurtful. So I, as much as possible, um, I try not to use trans as a suffix, or sorry, a prefix to put onto woman or put onto man. So I've gotten to using the descriptive phrases, a man with a gender identity. So that's clear. That doesn't obfuscate the issue the same way trans women would, because in these surveys and stuff they put out, people aren't clear as to the question that's being asked. They're not clear that they're being asked, would you like to see a man in a woman's change room? So by saying, would should trans women be in a woman's change room? People are like, oh, okay, well, this is some sort of woman.
Yeah.
So of course she should be in a change room. So by asking, should a man with a gender identity or a man who's on estrogen be allowed in a woman's change room? That's really clearing the issue. So that's putting into context what's being asked of people. Do you think this type of man should be in a woman's change room? And most people would go, no. And it's the same with women on testosterone. And I'm really working on inviting them to come back into women's space because that was one of the things. I mean, I'm as guilty of it as the rest of us were. We abandoned women's space. And for me, part of that decision to abandon women's space was being bullied by the men on estrogen. They were like, you have no right to be using a woman's washroom. Cause, and I mean, they emote so well. Like they really, really know how to just Oh, it's such a tragedy that you can just walk into a woman's change room and just use it because people just see that as acceptable. But you're on testosterone, so you have male privilege and you don't belong there. Well, you know what? I'm a woman. And the reality is that these men who took estrogen or are on estrogen and have had this body modification done have not defended women and children. They are allowing these predators to enter into this space and they are defending the predators. They're not defending women and children. So it's time for women to return to women's spaces and say, no, these men have shown socially that they are incapable of defending women and children. They are more, they are putting their needs ahead of that of this vulnerable population, and they are compromising children's safety, um, rather than acknowledging that predators are taking advantage of this loophole and they're walking through it. Um, I even had a conversation on Twitter, I know it was on Facebook, with someone who was saying, there's never been a rapist in a female prison that has impregnated a female prisoner. Like, ah, and trying to back up and find the history of stuff like this now on Google, because I know it happened and it's from several years ago. Um, but the Google feed just keeps burying inconvenient truths, right? Like it was like
Yes.
during the truckers rally, I tried to find a picture of a Terry Fox statue covered in gay pride flags, and I could not find one. And yet I know that the Terry Fox family had been complaining about this yearly for a long time, asking people to stop doing it. But there was you could find lots of pictures of the Terry Fox statue with the Canadian flag draped on him, right? So yeah, they seem to be burying information that they find inconvenient. Whoever's orchestrating that, I haven't got a clue. I'm just saying it's
I want
getting
to go
hard to
back
find
to
stuff.
women's spaces and how women returning, like females with gender identities returning to women's spaces. Now, something struck me when I talked to one of my favorite bearded lesbians, Scott Nugent, was when he was in Toronto with you. He
Yeah.
had someone like go crazy on him because he's in the women's washroom, but he's female.
Hmm.
And so there's that. And I just want to see, oh, I'm going to get crucified for using he, him pronouns. But like, that's another language thing that got cut out in our first opening discussion there.
Yeah.
I sometimes use those pronouns for people whose secondary sex characteristics really shine. I do. Um, but Scott was using the female change room and got really shut down and bullied and needed to have other females intervene.
Yes.
So in the past, I've spoke about men needing to be more accepting of AGP. We have an upcoming generation of porn sick kids
Yeah.
who have sterilized themselves or got themselves so hooked on some sort of sexual addiction that they have altered their psychology where they've integrated this AGP. We need to be empathetic and not bullying and encourage these men. But women out there, I know we have people on the right who follow us. I want to encourage them to be accepting of women with masculine features.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm using women's change rooms now. Well, I haven't used a change room yet. I don't know what that'll be like but I'm thinking my vasectomy scars that are like 12 inches each will be a little proof that I used to have breasts. But I have started using women's washrooms about, it was in January. I started doing that. It was just like, yeah, if I'm going to be telling other women that, you know what, it's time to grow up and adult better, as Scott Nugent likes to say, then I should be doing it myself,
Have you
to
had any
step into
negative
that.
experiences?
No, thus far people like sometimes I get looked at funny. But for the most part, I think women are just so used to seeing um masculine appearing individuals in their spaces that they just um, don't speak to it. And I go in, I go to the bathroom, I leave. I don't sit in the cubicle masturbating with used Tampax and stuff like that. Like we've all heard the horror stories of what some of these men on estrogen do once they get into the women's change room. And that's not my motivation for being there. And yes, there are a lot of men on estrogen whose only motivation for being in the women's change room was to use it for whatever the purpose it was designed for, whether it was the bathroom, the change room, whatever. However, like I say, they have failed in their duty as men to protect women and children. So it's time to evict them and say they need to be included in men's spaces. And we need to really embrace and celebrate men being different. I also think that it will affect the motivation of um, people who are wishing to have their children transitioned in order to gain um, social justice warrior credits. And that's definitely a thing that's going on. Listening to the whistleblower Jamie Reed, she talked about that quite a bit in some of the interviews she's done, where a mother would phone up and say, "Oh, I think my son is um, really a girl, and A and B and C and D are Y. So can my son be intaked into your clinic, and can I have a daughter?" And she'd say, "Well, no, that's not really trans characteristics." So the mother would ask, "Well, what is it? What is it?" Right? And then 2 or 3 weeks later, the mother would phone again saying, "Oh, now my child has these, things. So will you intake them now?" And she'd again challenge them and go, "Well, what about this? What about this?" And the mother would go, "No." And then the mother would phone back a third time and go, "Oh, well, now, the kid has A and B and C and D. Oh, and E and F and G. Oh, will you intake them now?" So, it was definitely questioning who was the driving force behind this child being transitioned. Um, and that was one of the things that really got her thinking about what's going on here. So yeah.
Jamie Reed, she is with LGBT Courage, isn't she?
LGBT Coalition. She was one of the founders of it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and that's Erin Kimberly is very much involved with that now.
I'm just loving Erin's videos lately.
Oh, they have a rock star.
And the bearded
Yes.
lesbian.
This whole
Yes.
bearded lesbian series, he has really taken that and just stepped into that space and gone, yeah, it's really time to question what we did and the choices we made to abandon all these spaces that AGP men on estrogen with body modifications are trying to now access. And they're not just trying to access, they're demanding and saying this is a human right. But
Unfortunately, they've ruined it for a lot of the homosexual transsexuals who had become accustomed to having these spaces. I think that they'll see a loss. I mean, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of an older homosexual transsexual who now has been living this life this way, and with the activism that needs to happen might very well lose their space. But I
yeah,
mean, it has to happen. Women need their space.
yeah, it's time to prioritize the needs of children over the wants and desires of adults, because I see gender identity and expression in our Charter and Rights and Freedoms. I don't see anything trans. Um, and the right to bully, I don't see bullying as a human right.
No.
Um, and the right to demand that's demanding that someone have sex with you because you've had surgery. Like, okay, okay, I've had these body modifications, therefore, it's like, no. if someone's not attracted to you, then they're not attracted to you. I remember in the 90s when I was in university, like late 80s, early 90s, there was this huge no means no. It was about date rape going on in universities and stuff, right? And the poster had like, I don't know, 30, 40 variations of no. Um, I'm busy. I need to wash my hair. Like it had all of those, and it was just like all of these things mean no. So accept them as no. If somebody's turning you down, no means no. And that women actually had a right to say no if they weren't interested in the individual who was making a sexual advance towards them. That the woman had the right to say no. And now somehow that's changed to a man with a gender identity who's had body modification done now has the right to demand that a woman have sex with him regardless of how she feels about the situation. Yeah, no. And no is not transphobic. That was the other thing I had said with Dre, that I don't think she added that clip, but or did she?
I can't remember.
Yeah, but yeah, no is not transphobic. It actually builds character, to be able to accept that I want something, but I can't have it. That that's a emotionally significant event that you grow. Like like no is really, if you listen to children, especially between the ages of 18 months and 3 years old, no is really the first word where they'll build a deep emotional connection and understanding to what it means. Especially when the parent is saying no, and you hear this child go no, right? Like they really are understanding emotionally what's going on, and that whatever their desire or want that was going on in that moment, they're having to accept that they can't have that thing. Um, and that's really the basis of emotional resilience, is built upon that. So this desire, or this understanding that we're developing, that if a person is trans identified, then they get to have whatever they want, is really creating, like Helen Joyce said it really well, and I'm paraphrasing her here, but it's creating a matrix of emotional instability where these people cannot deal with no. When it finally comes along that there's something they want that they can't have, they have a complete emotional meltdown.
Yeah, people need to know it, accept no, because then you can regulate yourself emotionally when you hear it again. I like what, speaking of Canadians, Erin Kimberly once tweeted something to do with, like, tell me what rights trans people didn't have
Yes.
under freedom of expression and like sexual orientation anti-discrimination laws. And it's true. But what they're wanting, and I don't get why they're wanting more. Like, what more can they have? They have the right to invade women's spaces the way the law is being interpreted right now. And I don't get what, like, you see it all the time. Trans rights are human rights. Like, what's next?
Yeah, and it's really important to talk about what you just brought up there, Scotty. Um, it's the way the law is being interpreted. It's not the way the law is written, because they created gender identity and expression as an entirely separate category from sex. So we still have sex in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and they added gender identity and expression as an entirely separate category. So the way the trans queer radicals are interpreting the law and trying to enforce it is entirely different than how the law itself is actually written. Because by separating those two categories, they said that A is fundamentally different from B. It's so fundamentally different that we're going to put it into a separate category. Um, so there is, in the way the law is written, a recognition that these two things are not the same. That's an assumption that can be made based on their having done it that way. Um, so the way they're interpreting it is how they're trying to it's like the mere exposure effect that Lansing talks about. It's they're merely exposing people to this idea that sex and gender are the same. And therefore, because I've declared that I am a woman, therefore I get to be in women's spaces. It's like the
Well, there's no
CBC.
clarity there. Like, what does that mean? I would like to see gender identity removed from there, just gender expression. Because if gender is just a construct and sex is real, then why do you need gender identity? Like, everyone has a sex, and regardless how you express that, then you start taking away women's rights once you start talking in that other language, like conflating sex and gender. So to me, and trans activists would say that's a genocide. I think the gender identity doesn't need to be there because they themselves say gender is a social construct, and that's where I can agree with them. Where, yeah, I believe it is. There's sex and there's stereotypical behavior of your sex, and gender expression covers all of that. But I mean, we got to define that word before we write any more laws, at least.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We've got to really look at what is this supposed to mean and how is it different from sex? Because sex is biological. Gender identity seems like a declaration of a faith based, because you can have a gendered soul, you can have a brain that is somehow
Well,
um,
ultimately, we don't need that either because to me, I drop because I have a past of being in the church. So often I rely on my sort of the way I critique something from a religious, spiritual point of view. We have laws to protect religion, but since the government decided to decide criticizing Islam was the special kind of phobia, they created this whole other law, and that's how I see the gender thing. I think gender expression is completely covered under freedom of expression. I don't
yeah,
think we necessarily need it, but we're creating a separate law for a certain faith, just like we did for Islam. And it seems like you can't criticize Islam, you can't say anything because it could be hate, and it's very much the same way. We, if you're asking me personally, I would want to repeal both. I guess. I said initially it was just identity, but if we draw greater strength to what exactly is freedom of expression, I think gender identity and gender expression falls within that. What
yeah.
are your thoughts?
Well, there was at a time definitely discrimination against people, and I mean by at a time I'm talking back when the first surgeries were being done, back in the early 1900s. Um, so that they created they modified a man's physical appearance to the point at which he appeared female, especially within the social construct, like the social context that occurred at the time. So they modified his body and he grew out his hair. He started to wear makeup and then put him in women's clothing. So within that social context, he was then seen and perceived as female because no other males were doing that, right? So they created a legal fiction and they allowed him to change his ID to be able to get a job as a woman, right? Um, so yeah, he would definitely have been discriminated against at that time. And that's the legal fiction that's been brought forward, and that the Harry Benjamin Foundation really started to advocate for, as far as changing your documentation and your legal ID. Now that gender identity is recognized in the law, and I agree, it needs to be recognized under a category, but it doesn't need to be a category in and of itself. It just needs to be recognized that people have the right to be different. So changing ID has now become irrelevant. Either be proud of who you are, stand up and say, this is who I am. Or maybe if you can't stand up and be proud of who you are, then maybe it isn't the right thing for you to be doing. Yeah, like it. No, I'm like gatekeeping existed because there were people that had unrealistic expectations of what these surgeries, what these modifications, what these chemicals, what the wrong sex hormones would do for them.
Oh,
And those were the people that we used to say no to. I actually had an individual I know access made last month. And when she first attempted to transition female to male back when the gender clinic existed in British Columbia, and she wasn't and she was told no. The psychiatrists were like, yeah, no, this is not going to help you. Yeah, you definitely have gender dysphoria. However, transitioning female to male is not going to help you because you have no stable identity. So the individual left BC, went to Ontario, attempted to get transitioned out there, got assessed, got refused in Ontario for the same reasons. They're like, you are not mentally stable. Came back to BC. By this time, the model in BC had shifted to the affirmation model. Under the affirmation model, she got affirmed, was allowed to get on testosterone, begin transitioning, and there her life was a mess. She ran what was called F to M, etc. in BC for quite some time, and was well known for having in her volunteer position, she was a social worker. In her volunteer position, she was well known for having sex with her clients. It was seen as questionable, but wasn't considered a violation of her professional standards because she
can
was
I
a
ask a question
volunteer.
here?
Yeah,
Was she preying on gay men?
no,
Okay.
other FTAMs.
Okay.
And So when she had a lower surgery, that surgery was a complete train wreck. And being faced with the reality of just how experimental that surgery was,
See,
she couldn't deal with it.
here's what puzzles me is it sounds like this is a lesbian woman.
Yes.
Why are lesbians getting phalloplasty? Like I've never actually asked Scott that. I'd like to understand why a lesbian would want to have a penis.
I'm not actually sure which of the lower surgeries she had because there's several. There's the metidioplasty, there's the phalloplasty, and I believe there's a third. I'm not sure. Um, she wanted to have the one where she could stand up and pee when she went to a men's room.
I don't understand what's gender affirming about peeing. Like when this first came out, let them pee, let them pee. I was like, yeah, let them pee. And I'm like, wait a minute. I had to put that question inward. When I take a piss, am I sitting here thinking, oh, good thing I can piss? Like I just feel so affirmed. And if I wasn't able to piss here, I would completely have never survived like puberty and accepting myself as a man. Like, holy fuck, no, none of that comes into my mind at all. So I want to know. I think I know the answer to this. I
For
think I know
me,
the answer lies in the fetish of certain heterosexual men as to why peeing is important. But
for,
for regular dysphoric people, and that, like, so what the fuck?
uh,
What is peeing about?
for me, the experience, like when I was a little girl, when I was younger, um, I did not. I'm not one of the ones who experienced myself as a boy. I experienced intense envy of boys because I was convinced that boys had it better. So that's my history. So in instances like my brother Trevor is, he was born 65. Yeah, so there's just under 2 years. There's about a year and a half between us. So we moved a lot place to place. Like I moved 20 times by the time I was 20. So we'd develop a new friend group. Sometimes we'd just be there for the summer, right? Like we'd arrive in May and move by September. So in those instances, he wouldn't necessarily, he'd just introduce me as Kellie to the kids we met and stuff. So they didn't realize I was a girl. So peeing always outed me. So when I transitioned, my desire um, to have the lower surgery was about that, so that I wouldn't be outed as a girl.
Okay.
What really shifted that for me was I'm trying to even remember what time it was, but a gay guy was like, "I sit down and pee." I was like, "Really?" And then other guys were like, "Yeah, it's why stand up? I mean, just sit down and take a piss. What's the big deal?" And I'm like, other guys just sit down and take a piss.
Well, as you were saying that, it's like, okay, there's times in my life that I wish that I had a vagina because I would just sit and piss. Like it's inconvenient. Like you don't know when those doors are gonna get like smushed in sideways, and all of a sudden you're wetting the wall. You just don't know when that's gonna happen. So for that reason, a lot of the times I might
Mhm.
choose to like sit and pee.
Yeah. And then I have heard the experience of some women who whose history is that they felt that they were should have been born a boy, that there was a grave injustice there that went on, who have talked about having fetishes regarding urinals and stuff like that, and the desire to be able to stand there with a phallus like everybody else and take a piss. So I'm not one of the ones who think that what do they call it? Autogynephilia is the man, so autoandrophilia. I'm
I'm not
not.
sold on that term
I
yet.
Yeah, I'm thinking that yes, there is definitely a sexual motivation that goes on in there, but I'm not sure that it's driven by the same mechanisms that drive men um, towards the feminine appearance.
We are living in an age of discovery because I think porn has had an effect on young women too.
Oh yeah.
A lot of this still relates to technology, and we are the experiments. So time
Hmm.
will tell. But I'm not sold on autoandrophilia, although I think that some women do maybe transition for sexual reasons.
Oh,
But
definitely.
it's different. And
Yeah.
my belief about even gender dysphoria, like we were talking about gatekeeping a little while back, and now even the term gender dysphoria is considered a gatekeeping term, and they have a
Yes.
slang for us called like trans, like scum, something scum.
True scum.
That's it, true
True
scum.
scum. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
believe that you need to have gender dysphoria.
Yes.
Now, my opinion on gender dysphoria has switched quite radically in the past 6 months. It's like, I think if gender is a construct, then gender dysphoria is kind of an illusion.
Yes.
But at the same time, like it made me think, like, no, I don't necessarily believe in true trans, like that you're a true trans. I think that there's conditions where other people might suffer because of they might want their arm cut off and it causes them great
Mhm.
stress. So I believe that in compassion, and that if someone is suffering, they should be able to access the medicine that is able to best relieve their suffering. And I think that
Yeah.
some people who have what's called gender dysphoria really have some sort of body dissociative thing that's accompanying all the stuff in the psyche that haven't really figured out yet. But it, I think that a lot of people, well, right now they're not giving them the chance to accept themselves, and it's
Yeah.
just this push to affirmation.
Yeah.
But when I say true trans, I think that there's some people out there who legitimately suffer as adults, and that door shouldn't be closed. But for the most part, I'm not sure how much transitioning would help people.
The studies, which are starting to be, brought up again, are showing that body modification, wrong sex hormones do not necessarily help people um, near as much as the trans queer advocates are trying to claim. That when you do the longitudinal research, so you're looking at 10 plus years, like you're looking at 10 years post, 20 years post, 30 years post, satisfaction rates drop, regret rates go up, suicide is off the charts. I mean, we're talking as high as 19 times the population baseline.
Mm.
So, and like I've talked to you about this before, like for me to get the counseling I need, I go out of country. I do online counseling because I can't get it legally in Canada. And
Because of the way the conversion therapy bill was written, it would be considered almost a hate crime or conversion therapy, right?
yeah, exactly. Because I've been diagnosed with gender dysphoria. Therefore, anything a counselor would do to help me be comfortable with being a woman is seen as conversion therapy. They can
Amazing.
affirm me. They can affirm me to be a male, but they cannot help me to reconcile with my birth sex, with being
Wow.
having been born a girl. And that's just wrong because like I'm seeing this more and more revealed as um like it's a culture, right? So like we've been talking about how um holding this gatekeeping of saying that somebody has to have gender dysphoria in order to um be trans, is they're now saying, oh no, that's not true, it's trans euphoria, right? So okay, so there's now they're saying it's not a mental illness, they're saying it's not a medical condition. So now all you're left with is religion, right? They're building a religious society where the 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 conversion event is a declaration that I was assigned female at birth, but I'm really a boy, right? So that's your conversion event. That's your first declaration that I belong to this culture. Um, and then they've got their founding texts like Judith Butler. I don't think you can belong to the gender cult and not believe that Judith Butler is a prophet, or as I call her, the Virgin Judith.
I'm eating
And
corn chips right now because our rage watchers like to put screenshots of things with me having things in my teeth. But go on.
So yeah, there is all these events, and there's the catechisms, right? We've talked about this. Trans women are women. If you can't say the catechisms, you can't be part of the cult. Um, so they're saying it's not a medical condition. They're saying it's not a mental health issue. So then it
And if
should
one of them
be
commits a crime, they're not trans.
no, not even that. It's if one of them commits a crime, it's because of transphobia.
But there's that too, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Especially if it's a big one like a school shooting.
yeah, and look at the Nanaimo Aquatic Center. Janaea got dumped all over for saying, "Oh, this I'm not saying, this was not a trans person, right?" And she got just totally um canceled for denying that this man who said I am a woman and entered the women's change room and creeped out the little girls in there. She denied that he was transgendered. So this is like, yeah, it is a culture. It is a culture that is based on a set of beliefs, and it should be protected. I think we should add it to religion
Well, why not?
and to be recognized as a religious status, because it's gone way beyond um, like the trans queer radicals are the ones who are saying this is not a medical issue. They're the ones who are saying this is not a mental health issue. I mean, I know I've said that several times in the conversation we've had, but they're the ones who are making these claims. They're the ones who are taking these positions. So
And we
let's
saw it. We saw it with the WHO. Like that recently happened since we had our last podcast. The
yeah,
World Health Organization was going to form a committee, and they had lunatic Florence Ashley, who thinks puberty should be optional for all children, on that committee. And there was a huge pushback, and they decided not to put any recommendations through for kids. But I mean, right there, like it totally exemplifies where we're at, what Florence Ashley said, because that's what it is in BC. You
yeah,
don't like you don't need any kind of dysphoria. You just have to have stress around
yeah.
identity. And who the fuck doesn't when you're going through puberty? Who doesn't? Like it's just we it's so easy, and we saw it in Quebec there. That never hit the news. That happened between now and our last podcast, where that person got it was a young person got puberty blockers in like 9 minutes,
Yeah.
and
An actress.
French
Yeah.
Radio Canada CBC did a expose on that,
Documentary
and they
on it.
were
Yeah.
vandalized, and that
Yes.
didn't even hit the news, and they vandalized our like our Canadian broadcasting company.
Yeah.
And you'd think that would make the news. They don't even report on themselves. That's how captured reporting is.
Yeah. And they called them transphobic for reporting what actually occurred and for doing a really good like they asked excellent questions. If this assessment is supposed to somehow be thorough and it's supposed to be informed consent, um how can you do informed consent over these types of life altering decisions in under 9 minutes when there's that clip that's being set out in the WPATH files where an endocrinologist is saying, yeah, I'm talking to these kids and they don't have the basic biology that they need to understand the consequences of the choices that they're making when when I'm prescribing them puberty blockers or wrong sex hormones. Like they don't have they don't have biology. They don't have a foundation in sorry, they don't have enough of an understanding of biological reality to even appreciate the conversation I'm attempting to have with them. And it's like, then why are the doctors going forward with this stuff when they're admitting that kids cannot make these decisions? And he also talked about how quite often not even the parents can understand what he's attempting to explain to them. So, and I don't know if you've read the essay that's going around, but I'm not sure. I can't remember the name of the person who wrote it. But they're basically saying that puberty is a violence that all children should be protected from, and that those who are opposed to puberty blockers are not understanding that puberty is this life altering, life changing event that everybody should have a choice on. Birth
Only one
is
of your most important, like, besides conception, only one of your like most important developmental fucking stages. Let's just fuck with that. That ought to be really good for health outcomes and
yeah.
oh
Well, I
my
was going
god.
to go with birth because birth is a traumatic event that is vital um, for like going through the birth canal um, is a major it has a major impact on the brain
That
and and
squeeze.
and, and it results in massive neurological die-off that is vital for healthy brain connections to occur because the nerves the brain cells that aren't meaningfully connected to parts of the body and stuff they die off as a result of that. And the
What if
other
what
major
if what if you just gave the C-section and then just gave like a real big noogie? Would that work?
no, but people are affected by C-sections. So the three effects are neurological in the brain, that the brain development that's go through, on the lungs,
Hmm.
because we come out head first. So the fluid that's in the lungs is driven all the way down like a balloon, and that fully opens the lungs and prepares us for breathing air. And the other is our digestive tract going through our mother's vagina. We get our mouth filled with bacteria and stuff that are vital to setting up the digestive tract for eating food, which is really, really interesting. So we don't go through that event, then we miss those three things. Um, and it's the same with puberty. Yeah, it's a traumatic event, but it's a traumatic event that's vital to us being able to fully function as adults. We have the, you know, surges in hormones that leads to sexual development. We have the final stages of frontal lobe development that leads to being able to understand choices and consequences. Um, and yeah, they're going about saying, yeah, you can interfere with these biological events and there's going to be no consequences, right? Of course, there's going to be consequences.
And they try and say that it's been used on kids, but really I can only think of when I've read about it, it's only been kids who've had like an early start to puberty and they kind of just want to slow it. Like someone at 8 years old is going through puberty and that's when they might have used a blocker.
Hmm. And it's an entirely off-label use. It has not been studied. It's not approved for that. And the consequences and for kids who are used for precocious puberty is the term, but for kids who are prescribed it for precocious puberty, they come off the drugs at the time where puberty would initiate itself. So 10 or 11 years old, they're coming off of the drugs. Where they're prescribing puberty blockers to people who are already teenagers, when they're coming off of the drugs, that clock has already gone forward through puberty. So um, and Dr. Paul Hruz, I think Hers is how his name is pronounced. He's an endocrinologist, and he talks about this a fair amount. So he's like they've gone through puberty, so the trans queer crowd saying that it's reversible. What they're referring to is the fact that yes, your body, a woman's body will return to producing estrogen, right? Her menstrual cycle will start back up. So those things will occur. However, the chronologically, you've aged through the puberty process. So that the chronological events that were missed can never be they'll never happen. So the clock that's played forward in the puberty process, the events that are triggered by that are never going to happen, are never going to occur. But like for a male,
What are those
who's
events?
well, for a male, your penis is never going to grow, right?
Right.
Because that whole cascade is tied into so many other occurrences that are going on in the body, that are the changes that are going on. So if you start blockers at 12, you come off it at 15. That process of penile development, that's happened. So you can't go back to being 12 and go through that. However, your testes are going to start to produce testosterone. So
Okay, I
you'll get
got
your
you.
beard development, you'll eventually have your male pattern balding, you'll get your muscle development, but you'll never get the same musculature development you would have had you gone through those years of slow increases. You won't get the bone growth, you won't get the bone density, you won't get the rapid twitch muscle fibers happening in the muscle. Like, so what they call fully reversible is like partially reversible.
And I imagine the testes would be small too, like, and
Yes,
not as effective as the testes you're meant to have.
correct. Quite often, males are left infertile because that stage of development, if it's gone through, is gone through and never happens, because you have the puberty blockers and then the initiation of the wrong sex hormones. And once again, the wrong sex hormones block the effect of testosterone on a male's body. So, as you're saying, that the testes don't properly develop and aren't able to produce viable sperm.
And then with that, I think would come a whole bunch of health complications where you'd probably need to, you could face osteoporosis, I imagine.
Yes. Osteoporosis is one of the most common effects. It sounds like it's on both males and females.
Now, I know someone who has an intersex condition where they didn't find out about it until later in life, but they have like smaller testes because of it, and they have to get hormone supplements to prevent like bone loss.
Yeah.
They're so important for like every cell, like for the functioning of every cell. It is a huge experiment we're seeing, and these activists have lied about the data.
Well, they've actively suppressed it. That's what really comes out in W files, is the degree to which they knew stuff, right? Like, they knew the rate of desistance was far higher than they admit. They knew the rate of regret was far higher than they've talked about. They knew that the rate of detransitioning was far higher than they've talked about. And WPATH has actively covered that up. Like, that's been an active cover up from the very beginning of their whole, back when they were the Harry Benjamin standards.
And that for those
Harry
who are
Benjamin
listening might
foundations.
know that is how the Dutch protocol formed, correct? And that's what we were. What that wasn't that what we were seeing like in the late '90s, mid '90s, like the
The
start
Dutch
of the Dutch
protocol.
protocol of affirmation only.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the Dutch protocol was the beginning of the affirmation fad, the justification for it, especially with children. And now the Dutch protocol has been formally retracted, and now there is a formal investigation headed by the federal government in the country
Where can our viewers
into
see
the
that?
research. I'll see if I can find the link. I'm trying to remember. It was the link was posted on X, so I should be able to find it.
Would SAGEM have covered that? The Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine?
Could be.
Okay, yeah. So check out SEGM, SEGM,
Yeah.
and because I know that they are Nordic, so I imagine they would have retweeted that out. I'm
Yeah,
interested in
and
that. I want to know what's happening from. I heard some whisper about they're now doing a follow-up study from all those kids who did from our generation, because they really came after our generation at Prides. I remember that when tea was added and all the lesbians started transitioning and 2S started showing up at like pop-up venues and prides talking about First Nations and 2S.
2005, 2010,
I would
wasn't
love
it?
to have a podcast to get different perspectives on 2S, because I have people who, like, I remember during the time people were for 2S joining the acronym, but then I also had people saying that no, 2S was formed because they didn't want to be part of the acronym, like the LGB, because it was this cultural thing, and they've created this new word to describe it, which it is a new word.
Yeah.
And they never wanted to be part of it because they wanted to be distinct, and they kind of, there was some racism apparently, and yeah, there was, because gay men, I remember the slogan was always no fats, no femmes, no Asians. So it was these huge body standards and shallowness within the gay community. I could see how there would be racism, you know, I could see that. And the two spirit, Cherry Smiley touched on this when I went to the feminist event earlier this month with Kathleen Stock. But the other speaker who was present as well was Dr. Cherry Smiley, and she's First Nations, and she touched a bit about the colonial aspects of Two Spirit,
Hmm.
and that like gender roles within Native American society, you had to learn how to do man stuff and woman stuff. And if there is a third or fourth gender, she doesn't know about it. And she's sure it's, and she just kind of confirmed to me what Two Spirit was all along, was just lesbian, gay, bisexual, indigenous people wanting to have
Yeah.
their own special, their own group. And why not?
Yeah.
But yeah, times have changed. They came after us and transed us. They added Two Spirit, and they added intersex and conflated the shit out of intersex. And
And intersex people are still not very happy about that. I know a couple intersex people, and they are like, no, we are not.
why don't we have them on our show and have an intersex expose?
I'll see if I can contact the individual.
That would be great. We need to get all those other people in the acronym. And so after my discovery of language boundaries and not being lumped into the 2G, LGB, I'm not going to say it. But I would love to have some Two Spirit people willing to speak up. I do know some, but the people that I do know are petrified to come
Yeah.
forward publicly.
Yeah.
But I'm sure, especially for those who never wanted to be part of the LGB acronym anyway, I'm sure they're not too thrilled about being called the alphabet soup acronym. Anyways, I want to take a look at what time it is here. How long have we been recording for?
I think we're at around an hour now.
We're an hour? All right, any thoughts before we wrap up?
Great
Hey,
conversation.
I know a great thought. Hang on, hang on.
You know something
You
I
have
love?
been invited to an event.
Oh, Megan Murphy.
Victoria.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Why don't we plug that before we sign out?
It is Let Women Speak Vancouver Island, May 30th. And yeah, it's really exciting. I'm honored to be there. The interview with Megan Murphy was absolutely amazing. She is a very gifted interviewer. She was willing to just really step into have a really sensitive conversation, and was very respectful.
Now, Kelly, where can our viewers hear this interview of you and Megan?
Um, you've got me now because I don't remember the name of her channel.
Not the same drugs,
Not that,
perhaps?
yes, yes,
Okay.
yeah, her YouTube channel.
Now it's on YouTube, but I think there might be like a Spotify link too.
Yes, I'm not aware what the
No,
Spotify
I
link
don't have
is.
Spotify for me, but for those viewers out there, if you do, it does have like an online built-in sort of platform. You can still listen to it on
Yeah,
Spotify. You don't have to have the app.
yeah, excellent. Yeah.
And so I keep saying I'll plug. I'm gonna write it down this time. Oh, my paper doesn't want to show up with my background. I want
Okay.
to link that in. I'm gonna link your
Yeah,
interview with
excellent.
Meghan.
Thank you, Scotty. Um, yeah, and the event is right in Victoria, so it should be exciting. The exact location will be revealed 24 hours before the event to protect the venue from vandalism and attacks by the trans queer plus peace. It's being protected from the peaceful people.
I've already seen
So,
threats out there about
wow.
it end by the I forget what they're called. Some flying squad against transphobia, and they have some sort of subsidiary Twitter accounts. And Meghan retweeted one of them about just pointing back to September, saying, "Remember when Meghan Murphy was forced to stop speaking because she was surrounded by blah blah blah."
Is this the same crowd that has created the whole hoopla with Emily Dugan running for school trustee in Castlegar?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so Emily was thinking she was their only target and was feeling so special. I'll let her know that she's special, but that she's amongst now a select
Well,
group
she
of
might she
special
might
women.
feel very flattered that she's achieved Meghan Murphy status.
Yes. Yeah.
So we should tell our if we have any listeners in the Castlegar School District 20
Yes.
that what would you call it? There's an election happening, and it is just
Yes.
for a trustee.
Yeah.
So a lot of people might have some apathy about voting because it is just a trustee position. But I mean, it's a really needed position. Emily will stand up for your rights, for child safeguarding, for parental rights. Get out there and vote for Duggan.
Yes. Yeah. Vote in your school trustee elections because they started the whole trans queer plus agenda by going after education. So this is about reclaiming education from the
People
radicals.
get so wrapped up. Emily can't make any changes, but she's one voice and she's one vote within that group, and I think it's a vote for sanity.
Exactly. And once one voice gets in, then the regular election is going to come by in 2 years, and we can get more voices for sanity in. Yeah, exactly.
All right, we should say goodbye to our viewers. It's been great chatting with you, Kelly.
Great conversation, Scotty. Thank you so much.
All right, bye, everyone.
Bye.